Today on our Tech for Business podcast, Todd, our COO and CISO, and I are joined by Ricky, the Senior Account Executive from Verkada. So thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'm glad to be here. Happy to have more of a conversation today.
Yeah. So I like to start the podcast with our audience and who should be listening. But when it comes to physical security, which is what we're talking about today, kind of feels like everybody needs it. So my first question is kind of flipped. Who do you think the ideal customer or what is the ideal fit for Verkada? And Todd, you can kind of jump into this too, being, a CIT and a partner of Verkada's. Who are the people in the room? What is the best customer?
That's a good question. I think looking at physical security as a whole, there's been a migration of how people have come to use Verkada and looked at physical security just in general. Back in the day, it was a lot more technical. A lot more technical folks had to be involved to make it work, but everyone kind of was used to the good old camera system. Physical security has definitely advanced today to where it now encompasses things like access control, visitor management, things like that. So when we're talking about who is the ideal customer, who would use Verkada the best, it would be anybody who really touches those areas, not just your typical security folk. A lot of that's shifted now towards the IT team getting involved, the operations group, whether it's an office manager, people who are into the day-to-day of how people are interacting with your physical space. That's where a lot of people are coming to Verkada. Now, where Verkada goes up and above and beyond for people is if you have multiple sites that you need to manage that for. If you have several distribution centers, warehouses, patient clinics, things like that, being able to manage multiple of those from one location, that's where Verkada really shines, and that's where people get the most value from Verkada.
Yeah, just to expand on that a little bit, I would say that one of my favorite answers would be it depends, but the compliance industry is obviously an easy answer, right? If you have compliance and you need to do physical security, you got to have cameras on the buildings, you have to have door access, et cetera. It's a natural fit. However, I do think it goes quite a bit further than that. I mean, you obviously see it in a lot of schools and whatnot today, which may not be an obvious aha for a lot of organizations. It probably is for the schools, but more as an educational piece. And then there's other places where it just makes logical sense too, where it could potentially solve a business need. So, for example, I used to work with an organization who had a lot of theft and they were a manufacturer. Didn't have any compliance reasons they needed to do this, but they had a lot of theft. And when we brought the Verkada solution to them, we found that we were able to, quite frankly, we sold it because we knew we could solve the theft problem. The tool set, we'll get into this a little bit later, but the tool set was robust enough that we were able to identify and track the individual that was doing the theft and flat out stop it. So for them, the business case made a lot of sense. And so, quite frankly, the answer could be anybody, as long as it makes business sense to do so.
Absolutely. And I'll take that even a step further. It's the people who want to future-proof their investment into physical security as well, where a lot of this has been in place since, the 80s and 90s in a lot of cases we're seeing. And the same type of technologies existed for so long that now when people are making investments in this, they want to say, okay, what can I invest in now that I can build on for the future? And so that's bringing a lot more people to the table that are more forward thinking towards that type of mentality.
Sure. I'd love to go a little bit deeper into when you're talking about, scalability and when you said this kind of interconnected, if you have multiple sites. So what really, maybe it's just those two things, maybe it's more, what really sets Verkada apart from other physical security solutions?
It's a good question. Try to keep it as concise as possible with this, but our goal is to create the most modern enterprise security system on the market. And so what does that mean for you? It's no NVRs, it's no DVRs, there's no servers, DIC clients or VMS software. It's just the device and our cloud-based software. What used to take hours or even days to investigate now can just take a matter of minutes. And you don't even really need to have anybody on site to do that. You can do that from the comfort of your home. If you're on a vacation, if you're traveling, it's allowing for a lot more of that scalability outside of just what used to be just in the buildings. So beyond that, the vision is just outside of being the most easy to use solution on the market, it's being the most scalable platform as well. So whether it's one camera, 10 cameras, 10,000 cameras, or doors. We have customers who've done this at that scale. So what set us apart is that our experience doing small deployments and large deployments, it's been battle tested through a variety of different situations already. So it's ready for pretty much anybody who's open to come into this market, especially in a cloud-based solution where a lot of the direction is going. We have the ability to make that a very easy to use experience for them.
Yeah, and it may not be obvious to everybody, but I just kind of wanted to highlight that real quick is it is a very heavily cloud-based system. So when he's talking about no NVRs, DVRs, et cetera, it's been a while since I've had those tool sets, but we were joking at the beginning of this before we started the podcast that I would call those straight trash garbage solutions where they were so difficult to use, they were nearly useless to me. It's been a while since I've had that, but the fact that it is cloud-based really opens up the door for a lot. So the future-proofing part is what I wanted to highlight is you do get that scalability, you do get the ability to get new functions, features, et cetera. And again, it has the ability to, quite frankly, infinitely expand as you need to.
I will say another facet of the scalability is the ability to scale beyond just one type of device. Where in the past it's been, your camera sit on your network and then you have your NVR, your DVR. But if you want access control, you're gonna have to go through a different provider, different system. Maybe they integrate, maybe they don't. But there's a lot of breakdowns that happen in that. And so what Verkada has done is we've taken that, we brought it all in-house. So whether today it's, you need to solve for your camera problem, and then down the road, you need to solve for your access control or your alarm system, environmental sensors, your guest management, you have an ability to grow then just beyond what you started with and into something that you're eventually going to use or potentially could benefit from.
So I know Verkada kind of sits within all these different industries, and I'm a little curious, what are some of the unique challenges? And Todd, too, when you were talking about manufacturing or education, what are those really specific challenges that industries are facing that Verkada can support with?
Yeah, I'll just take a few of them. I mean, there's a lot of different areas that we play in, whether it's in, schools and education, municipalities, retail, healthcare, manufacturing. There's a lot of different places, and they all come with their own different needs, have different use cases for it. Retail is an example. This last year, they've combated over, $100 billion a year in retail theft loss and shoplifting. But that's compounded on top of the fact that now it's starting to affect worker safety. And so now they're having to be more conscious about how we're protecting our people there, both customers and their workers, because it is having a deeper impact on the company's ability to function, period. That kind of also bleeds a little bit over to healthcare, right? With patient safety, staff safety, privacy, all of those things come back into play again. And the idea is how can they improve their current posture in physical security, and then also build upon that to other areas that would include things like AI and analytics. Those are areas that they continue to expand. AI is in our face every single day. It's hard to run from it at this point. So how can they utilize it best? And especially in the physical security world, how can they use that type of technology to lighten the lift of what they're doing every single day?
Yeah, I don't know how deep we'll get into the technology aspects of the tool set, but there is a lot there. There's a lot of stuff which you can get into with facial recognitions and whatnot. So if you talk about like a school instance, and I don't want to get too terribly morbid, but there are a lot of concerns about things that happen in the world around schools. And if you've got a tool set that would have the ability to do something like facial recognition, and I know there are some privacy concerns of that, and I'm sure we'll probably have to talk about that at a minimum, but there are things that you can do if you had a known person that you didn't want on the premise of a school to have a camera system be able to alert you on that fact that they're coming up trying to get access to the building before they've even gotten to door access, man trap, whatever they need to be. And this could be true across the board. It doesn't need to be schools, but hypothetically, that could be a situation where you want to do it. And then, of course, we get into all the reasons of, do I have the ability to follow individuals through the building and so on and so forth. So all that stuff is great. Manufacturing, again, I kind of touched on that. There's a lot of good things that you could potentially do with it there too. I use the example of theft, which, is obvious. I think Ricky did a really nice job when you kind of talk about all the reasons why you want to keep people secure. I mean, the reality is it's called physical security for a reason, right? It's not just a technical tool that gets put in place where you're just assuming technology is going to take care of you. There's a lot of technology on the background, but there is reasons why you want the physical security aspect as well. And it really is to keep your team, your people safe and secure.
Absolutely. It all kind of comes back to the main idea of what we go towards in our vision is, to protect people, assets, and privacy. Whether that's at schools, whether that's in a retail location, in a hospital. Schools has obviously been a huge part of Verkada's growth and what's catapulted us so much, and especially in the rapid adoption of what we bring to the table for that in terms of how do you protect, student privacy, their safety, visitor management, because what used to be the standard of people just going to the school to pick up their child has completely changed in the last 5 to 8 years, and it continues to change. So to give them an easy to use tool that they can have over time and continue to build upon, that helps them be more mobile for the ever-changing challenges that come within schools, as an example. So
it feels like a natural progression to talk a little bit more about the data privacy, because as important as keeping people safe is, it is a little kind of nerve-wracking to think about, all of these cameras and things around me. How do I know that my privacy is being protected, that we're meeting appropriate compliance, especially in these different industries that require that?
yeah, and state legislatures have even taken account of that, and they've put different laws in place, places like Illinois and in Texas, where facial analytics aren't legal. You can't have those types of things there, but they still want to be able to have the ability to be proactive and to be alerted on certain things. And so there's an ever-changing balance of how do we keep people safe, but how do we make sure that their privacy is being protected. So different features, whether that's face blurring, limiting access to specific users and capabilities within the system itself. Those are things that Verkada takes very seriously, from a privacy standpoint, especially. But there's a whole gambit of just how do you make sure that the system that you have is both capable but also safe
Mhm.
at that point too. So there's a lot of areas we can get into that, but we've made a lot of great strides, and a lot of people have noticed how we've put the tools in their hands to kind of make it their own in the situations where they need it to be.
Yeah, I'll dive slightly more technical, and I am not the technical resource for Verkada, but real briefly, I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier about how the technology is different. The camera storage itself is on the camera. It's not
Mhm.
automatically in the cloud, even though it's a cloud solution and you can store it there. It is not by default heading up to the cloud. So it's not like you're pumping all your private data up to the cloud and it's just there for the world to go grab. That's not how this is set. So when we're talking about privacy, the tool sets are designed to be privacy centric. There are a lot of functions that you can enable as you're going through a lot of different things. So for example, you can do license plate recognition, you can do some facial recognition. There's a lot of stuff that's in the tool set. You don't have to share all that data all the time. So I know you wanted privacy, but I kind of feel like I had to get a little bit into the tech a bit just to kind of go, there's a lot here, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of privacy, and I don't know if it's still an elephant in the room, but I want to address it because I had heard it in the past. Most people may or may not know Verkada did have a security incident a bit back, and it's been a year and a half or so, maybe a little bit longer. And I don't know if you've got much insights onto it a lot at all, Ricky, but I can expand on it a little bit if you'd like. I just kind of wanted to say it was a concern at one point, and that steps have been taken from there.
Yeah, I mean, it was to give some more context to it. So back March 9th of 2021, we did have a security incident, exactly like you said, where we have since learned from a lot of that. Verkada undertook a lot of response and mitigation activities to make sure that everything that was compromised was taken into effect with that. So, I mean, there's a whole summary of this on our website too. So if listeners are more curious about the details of all of it, more than happy to have direct them towards the website and on some of the details of that. But a lot of that came down to how do we detect those type of incidents? How do we analyze that? And then it's kind of been the overall arching theme of anybody who's been content, or I mean, more apprehensive about moving to the cloud in general, is cybersecurity as a whole. Cybersecurity has definitely taken front and center in a lot of situations, especially in recent years. And so how do we maximize our cybersecurity posture as you continue to migrate towards the cloud. In our most recent State of Physical Security blog post, there was we surveyed about 1,500 IT and physical security leaders across different verticals and industries. And it came back pretty consensus that, 92% of them are planning a migration to the cloud, whether or not that's from a hybrid solution or a true on-premise solution. And so a lot of those security questions come up. How are they feeling about cloud security in general? And how is that going to affect their ability to move in the future? Over 80% of them agreed that it has improved in the last 5 years, and it's going to continue to do so over the next, 5 to 10. And then especially in terms of what we've been able to do to respond in the situation, it's kind of that adversity that has allowed us to look at what we have and then build upon that. And so I think our response has been well documented, but two, well received by a lot of the people who have come on to Verkada since then, and really seen the impact we've had change with the introduction of, new leadership, new approaches towards how our devices are configured. Things like that have all come into play to really strengthen our security posture in cybersecurity as well, not just your physical security, to make sure everything is secure on that side as well.
Yeah, speaking as a security professional, I for those that are listening and are curious about it, I felt like the Verkada response was, this is how you do it, right? I mean, they handled it extremely well. They were very professional about it. There was a very clear outline of what happened and what they're going to be doing going forward. There was very specific communications on how that was proceeding. It was extremely well handled. Where we're at in the world, here we are 3 years later. I said it was a year and a half ago, quickly how time flies, but looking at where we're at this point, I almost feel like most people are starting to get a little numb to all the security events, and so this may be old news and nobody cares anymore. But just from my perspective, I felt like that was handled extremely well. And as you mentioned, there was a lot of stuff that has come from that. There was a lot of lessons learned and applied going forward. And from my perspective, I know I called it the elephant in the room, but from my perspective, looking at it, it feels like you definitely took the lessons to heart, and it's a much better, stronger security posture due to the event. And I know that's kind of a terrible way to get to where you're at, but you have handled it extremely well from my perspective. So that probably sounds like a little bit of pandering, but I am being honest. I thought Verkada handled it a little bit very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll make sure to have those links in the description if you want to learn more. Love it. But kind of speaking on this kind of learning and growing, I'm interested in we just had an AI webinar the other day, and we've had a lot on zero trust, and we continuously are talking about this new technology that's just growing so rapidly. How does Verkada make sure that they're like staying ahead of those trends and not falling behind in the world of AI and cloud technology?
I think that's a good question, and there's a couple different ways you can look at it from how Verkada operates as a whole. I mean, starting back in 2016 when the company was founded, starting out just with cameras, and then moving to today where we have 7 or 8 different product lines. The constant innovation has been part of what's been on the forefront of our expansion and our growth. But the AI, especially in the last couple of years, has really been where people are focusing right now. So even from that same state of physical security, AI is one of the most important parts of what people are looking at. One of those things being, how do they take that AI and make it benefit them? Mm-hmm. So whether that's, video analytics, predictive modeling, those are 2 areas that a lot of people are focused on, especially in cloud-based physical security. How can they use that the most? And so a lot of how we've developed that, from my understanding, has just mainly been through interacting with our customers. We do have a channel to get feedback from customers, what they'd like to see. And those changes, because it's cloud-based, take place oftentimes overnight in a lot of cases, where we can push an update and all of a sudden they get access to features they didn't have before. We recently just pushed out our AI-powered search, which allows you to search with natural language. People got access to that overnight, and that was just a feature that was able to be turned on. And so whether that's the facial analytics part of it, the people tracking, visitor management side of it, those are areas that people are wanting to utilize more to lighten the lift of the individuals who are using this every single day. And by getting involved with their customers and keeping our ear to what people are looking for and they're asking for, that's what's allowed us to continue to innovate on the recommendations and feedback that we get.
Very cool. So to close out, I'll kind of ask a very general question. So maybe not so specific on Verkada, but just physical security as a whole. What do you think the next trend will be in that world? And maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, but what is kind of that next big trend coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, again, I'll probably go back and quote a little bit more from our most recent physical security, state of physical security. The idea that came across after surveying so many people is really, how do they achieve greater scalability, real-time alerting, so they want to be notified of things happening in real time or as close to real time as possible. AI, because there's no way we're going to be able to advance without it. I think no matter what industry you're in, AI will be a topic of conversation, whether it's, this year, 5 years, 10 years from now, how are you adopting that and making that a part of what you're doing? But with that also comes the device integration and the remote management. Those are all things that those professionals mentioned as those are the areas that they're continually looking for and have noticed is going to be part of their decision making over the next 18 to 24 months as they're making that transition to the cloud and as they're improving their physical security, whether with Verkada or with whoever they end up going with. Those are the areas that they're going to be evaluating.
Yeah, I don't imagine it's any kind of surprise, but I would say the only thing that I'd add on to it in case it wasn't clear is I think you're going to see a large consolidation of tool sets. So as mentioned a little bit earlier, you're starting to get into not just cameras, it's door access, it's alarms, it's environmental sensors. You can kind of see it's all starting to come together. And it's not terribly surprising. ADT has been trying to do it for years and whatnot, but on this scale, it is a little bit different. And as you see, you can kind of look at the roadmap from Verkada, and that's the direction they're going to, is how do we get all the things into an integrated system that all works together, communicates together, and gives you better security across the board? That would be the biggest trend I think that I see, is it's just all coming under a single umbrella instead of having to piecemeal it all together.
For sure. Well, I'm excited. It'll be cool to see kind of what comes out of Verkada and for physical security as a whole. But thank you so much for taking the time with us today, Ricky. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, glad to be here. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you want to know more about Verkada or you want to get in touch with anyone on this podcast, please reach out to us at info@cit-net.com or head out to our website, cit-net.com/podcast. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode.